You are listening to Unscripted Moments, a podcast about Propagandhi. On this Part 1 episode, Greg and two guests discuss Ladies' Night in Loserville, track number 9 from today's Empire's Tomorrow's Ashes. On this episode, Greg welcomes two guests. The first conversation about the song is with Mary Best. Listeners will remember Mary from her appearance on the Refusing to Be a Man and Fuck Machine episodes. This conversation with Mary is a direct follow-up to Mary's appearance on episodes 56 and 65, and this conversation completes a sort of trilogy of conversations with Mary that trace Propagandhi's journey through songs about feminism that span from 1993 to 2001 in the band's discography. We might also release a standalone bonus episode of Mary's full Fuck Machine Ladies' Night in Loserville audio, which was recorded across one sprawling 2-hour conversation, which Greg cut in half for these two episodes. And Mary's contributions to the podcast have been invaluable. We've received so many great comments, feedback, and compliments for her contribution. So we're incredibly thankful for her participation to the podcast, and of course for her commentary on this sort of trilogy of songs. And the second guest in this episode is Dwayne Larson. Dwayne is a longtime friend of the podcast, and he and Greg actually met. They got to meet and hang out and spend some quality time together in Winnipeg for the October 2021 Propagandhi hometown shows. Dwayne is a well-known and well-respected photographer in Winnipeg. He works on the podcasts Filters Removed and also It's a Music Thing. It's a Music Thing has crossover material related to this podcast too, where he has published interviews with Propagandhi tour manager Greg Daly, Agassi bassist Ryan Nash, and the mighty Todd Kowalski, and much, much, much more. Interestingly, Dwayne is also the photographer who took the Tony Sly photograph that adorns the Tony Sly tribute record cover. As always, timestamps are available in the show notes. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram at PropagandhiPod, and Greg and I will be back for a Ladies' Night Part 2 chat down the road, so thank you very much for listening.
Thank you to Keith for that fantastic introduction. Before we kick it off with Ladies' Night in Loserville, with this doozy of a conversation from Mary Best, following up from the Fuck Machine episode, and then following up Mary with the fantastic photographer, friend of the podcast, Dwayne Larson, I have a cover here for you from UK-based mix engineer and producer John Harcus. I found this awesome cover on John's YouTube page, and he was so gracious as to give us permission to include it in the episode. John has a playthrough video of him singing, playing guitar, and playing bass on his channel, which is well worth watching after hearing this cover. A commenter on John's channel asked about the drums, and John answered saying, "Those drums are Get Good drums, modern and massive with a few extra kick and snare samples, JV glass kick from Hardcore Music Studio, and American Fat Snare from Circles layered on top using Slate Trigger 2. So you can find more of John's stuff at his YouTube channel at Harcus Audio. But for now, let's hear John Harcus playing Ladies' Night in Loserville.
How much more bullshit you had left? 'Cause you beat me this crap.
think that we should launch into Ladies' Night in Loserville and get a slightly different perspective and story going on here?
Yes. Okay.
Why not? Well, I mean, this is a different one. You know, I'm really interested to chat with you about Ladies' Night in Loserville, and this is a song. So there are many songs in the Propagandhi catalog that Keith and I procrastinate intensely from talking about. This is one of them. Fuck Machine is another one of them that we procrastinate. We procrastinated Oka Everywhere. We procrastinated Dear Coach's Corner. There's Mate Ka Marisa Kun Rasi Khan. There are some that were like, we talk about it for 12 or 13 weeks before we actually record it because we just keep kicking the can down the road. And Ladies' Night in Loserville has been this one for me that I've kicked the can down the road so many times. But before we get into the song, I'm wondering how you feel about Today's Empires, Tomorrow's Ashes, which could not be more different than How to Clean Everything. And I'm just curious your thoughts on it.
It's actually really funny. So every song you've asked me to do is for a record that I don't really... I mean, Let's Talk More Rock is, I do like that now.
That makes me really happy. Like, I love that I'm dragging you into this and you're like, oh God, this is like, oh man, this one, why can't I do a record that I like?
Yeah. So, we may have a visitor soon. I hear my dog. He's dressed as a taco.
Oh, awesome. Taco dog.
Anyway.
And he's got a mustache too. He's got a big mustache.
He does, yeah.
He's a cutie patootie.
Cut this out, but that my dog is coming.
Oh, no, it's staying in.
So
dog stays in. Cutie patootie taco dog with a mustache.
Yeah. Today's Empires came out before I liked Propagandhi. So it was the last record that came out before Potemkin, which is the first record that I actually loved. Like really loved though. It was a sudden and complete love affair. But Today's Empires, Tomorrow's Ashes, I actually hadn't heard at all before I heard Potemkin, and I went back and was hopeful of Today's Empires, and then again I didn't listen to it for years. It's actually a really good record, and I'm super excited about the remaster remix
next week.
Yes, super excited. Pre-ordered, all ready to go. Taking time off work.
Sweet.
Not just for that, but like, I'm not gonna lie, I'm taking time off work. So my problem with that record may be fixed in its entirety with the remaster. I know Chris had said in a couple of interviews that he wasn't sure if, you know, it was worth doing, like if people would want that. And I'm like, maybe not for every other record, although it would be interesting to hear like How to Clean Everything with like better vocals and I don't know. That would be interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'd buy it, but it'd be interesting. But Today's Empires, Tomorrow's Ashes came out at a time when music was heavy music, at least. There was this big push for everything to be like really loud and intense.
Yeah.
And so when they were mixing and mastering, things got compressed and sounds got all muddy, and I just can't with that. It's weird because I like hardcore punk, so I love that like distorted, messy sound, but I actually can't listen to hardcore without having seen it live first. So awesome. I have this thing where I'll listen to it live and hear it in person with like ideally a good sound person or a decent sound person. And then I can carry over the love to the recordings. But I find most recordings have the same problem where they're just too loud. People don't really know how to keep the difference in sound quality. So I see music a little bit and I find it muddy. That's the best way I can really describe the record. It's just the tones are weird. The voices, like the vocals sink into the background, not Todd so much, but Chris's sink into the background a bit more than I would like. And I don't like the guitar tone. It feels compressed. I don't know if it's actually compressed, but it feels that way. So I've always lamented Today's Empires because I really wanted to love it. There's so many good songs on there, and I love the lyrics to Purina. Love. But I can't listen to music that has like just it bothers my ears. I've had a lot of, this is personal. Y'all need to know what my 8 concussions. And I have some like inner ear problems. So sometimes music literally like bothers my ear in a way that I can't get into it, but I could never get into it until I listened to it for Ladies' Night in Loserville, and I listened to it for like a week, and now I'm like, give me that remix so that I can actually hear it the way hopefully it was intended to be heard.
I think the band is so excited about it. Like, I feel so good about it because, like, I think that even if, like, so I'm not a very experienced audio person. Like, I love music and obviously I listen to tons of music all the time, but like the way that music lands on me, it doesn't like, I've never really had those kinds of problems with Today's Empires, but the fact that the band themselves are so happy with the new product makes me know that I will like that one more because they feel happy with it. And if they're happy with their work, I am just inherently going to like it more. Does that make sense? So I'm kind of like, I don't really know if I'm sure I'll notice some differences, but I don't have like a fine-tuned like studio engineer or very, very professional musician approach to listening to music. So like, as long as they're happy, that's something that just will make me happy and will enjoy the new version. Because I know that some people out there are like, I'm going to listen to the original one because that's the way it came out. But like, I just am so excited for the new one.
I remember being a pretentious punk. That's fine.
There you go. There you go.
No, I agree. I think that the fact that the band is into what they've done and we're so disappointed with the first one, which I wasn't aware of until recently, but I think it'll be good. I can't notice always, right? People remaster and remix. I can't notice the difference between songs. I'm not like a big audio, audiophile either. I've done a little bit of mixing and stuff, but it's just it's a feeling. It's not even like I couldn't tell you what the levels were, or like even if it is compression that's bothering me. It's just something.
I love it.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get into the song Ladies Night in Loserville. I watched a video of Propagandhi performing this song live in 2003 in Chicago, and it's one of the only live performances that I could find online, and the sound quality is fabulous. It's like a straight off the mixing board at the Congress Theater in Chicago. It sounds great. And at the beginning of the song, Chris says, pro-feminism, pro-sex, and then they launch into the song. So it's a far more pro-sexuality song, in my view, that actually feels like empowerment of like a badass pro-sex woman who seems to embrace her own power and who feels powerful in her social interactions to say certain things. And it seems like a big shift between the tone of the tune on How to Clean Everything and you're refusing to be a man on Let's Talk More Rock, and then this song in 5 years later in 2001 on Today's Empires. And I'm wondering if you can just generally comment on like the shift in feminist movements between these three records. Why would they write such a different song is what I want to know about the context that this was created in.
It's the same song. No, it's not. But again, like I said in the last episode, it was discourse. It was conversations that were going back and forth. It was never like, this is what feminism is, although people from the outside have often reduced a very large body of work to like whatever is popular. It's the greasy wheel. Nope. Squeaky wheel gets the grease. Yeah. So the stuff that was really, really loud and really disseminated in the media is what got heard. But it is the same conversation. The conversation was what is in the interest of encouraging women's freedom and gender freedom now as we move, into a new era where we're actually including things beyond the binary. How do we best encourage and support liberation for all genders? And so the conversation was repression, hiding your sexuality, maintaining safety at the cost of maybe being loud with your sexuality, or saying, fuck the patriarchy, this is who I am, and, if you push past my boundaries, there will be consequences. That discourse in the kind of 80s, early 90s, kind of solidified. Refusing to Be a Man, the book by Stoltenberg, was written because they were talking directly about how it's not just about what women do to be safe or to be free. It's also about what men have to do. So I am going to refuse to be the man who abuses people. I'm going to refuse to be the man who is, causing harm. I'm going to refuse to be the man who's causing harm to myself. Like, can't be my own person because I'm trying to live up to these ridiculous ideals. So that was part of the discourse, and that came forward. And then patriarchy, because like I said in the last episode, patriarchy adapts, and it's not just patriarchy, it's all oppressions. Our systems are built on oppression, all of them. Every system that we use, our financial system, our social systems. I work for a not-for-profit that's been around for like 100 years, and we've always been pro people, pro helping people, but we've also always had systems of oppression built in. So patriarchy has found a way, looking at this like, should we be repressed or should we be sexually free, to win no matter what. So women who decide to be sexually active, sexually loud, are, used in the media to sell whatever is being sold. They're, used to get people's attention. They're used to make money, and they're made fun of and put down for doing those things. And people who are, repressed, Larry Flint and his, I used to love Playboy. I did, I'm not going to lie. I had a Playboy bunny party once in Toronto, because fuck patriarchy. I will do what I want to do. And I didn't realize at the time the harm that I might have been doing at the same time. So basically this conversation of repression versus sexuality comes forward. And now there's a bunch of dudes in this conversation for Ladies' Night in Loserville. There's a bunch of dudes who are probably having a conversation. I've lived through this so many times. A bunch of dudes talking about what's best for women. And the woman is just sitting there in the background saying, I'm just going to keep drinking because it's more productive than actually engaging with these people. I spent a lot of time in my 20s in particular in political circles, in activist and anarchist circles, and there was a lot of people who were just there to get laid. Not a lie. Saying the right things, acting woke, although that wasn't the term at the time, so that they could seem sympathetic and vulnerable and interesting. And that's the impression I get from these guys. They're just having the conversation to seem, to get the right optics, right? To fit in to whatever kind of social circle they've determined that they want to be part of. So it's the same conversation, but now the patriarchy has used women's freedom of sexuality. They've used women's repression, and they've used those things to punish them or to continue to exercise power over them. I'm pretty sure I had another quote for that. I don't know.
Could you see the newscaster from the Fuck Machine song as being the same character in this song? Could you see those being the same people?
No, maybe. Honestly, I'm not very hopeful when it comes to the things that the patriarchy does to people. I think most of us have these giant social systems thrust upon us. People make culture, culture makes people. A lot of them we don't even see it happening. It's very taken for granted and assumed. And I think that the type of thing that happened to that anchor, it's possible that person would have come back and said, like, fuck you, I'm here, and I'm bitter in a bar. It's a nice movie. Five drinks movie in. Story. But I think what would have actually happened to that person, like I said in the previous episode, is that they would have lost their career. They would have learned the consequences of standing up for themselves in a system, and they would have stopped doing that. That's my experience with what most people will have happen. I can't imagine that the person in this song is much older than 25, and if that person is older than 25, then I can't imagine that they're younger than 55.
I was thinking that the person in the Ladies' Night in Loserville, this woman, I picture her as being 40 to 45, like post divorce with a husband who was possibly emotionally withholding in every way and just like emotionally absent and punishing, and then when she would call him out on it, he would make her feel badly about herself until she eventually snapped and just is like, I'm out of here, like this marriage is not a partnership, I'm gone. And then has some kind of renaissance while single. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, it could be, that's what I'm saying. It could be someone 55 or older who's like, I no longer give any fucks.
Yeah.
Yeah. When I actually listened to this, again, I'm old, so not, I don't know. Do you ever see Good Will Hunting?
Oh yeah. You're
Yeah.
serious? Of course.
And there's that scene where Matt Damon is like listening to the pretentious douchebags in the bar in Boston, and they're kind of saying all the right things to try and get the girl and trying to come off as being very smart, and then he talks to her and gets her number and he says, how do you like them apples or whatever. I get that scene in my head because that's what it is. It's the guys who've taken kind of politics out of being something that's actually for the benefit of everyone. It's no longer a discourse. It's a debate where you've got to prove that other dudes are wrong so you can get laid. And I've been in this space where these people, intentionally or not, that's what they're doing. They're just, it's not about actually working together for a common solution. It's about accumulating power. Yeah, it's problematic.
Let's talk about these lyrics, because this is a wild tune. I have read critiques of this song as well, where people say this is the most cringy Propagandhi song, which I was really kind of shocked by. But I don't know. So like, I'm curious about your thoughts on some of these words. So we have these opening lines: drains her fifth, which I take to mean her fifth drink of the evening.
Yeah. It could be. Yeah, it could be a fifth of whiskey though.
It could be. So we're either super smashed on a fifth of whiskey, or it's the fifth drink. So we're about to be. We're just at the precipice of being drunk. And spits out a Greek translation. She slurs, how much more bullshit you got left, because you've been feeding me this crap about free speech and thought police like I'm supposed to sit and swoon. So when I see this line, the visual that I get is, that meme of the woman in the bar with the guy who's wasted yelling in her ear, and her face is like this. Like, because this guy like is in a bar and it's like attached himself to her, and he's just yelling things in her ear, thinking that he's impressing her while he's like doing his thing, trying to be like, hey, I like you. But he's essentially just yelling drunken insanity into her words. And so that's like the I'm supposed to sit and swoon part. And I'm just curious on your thoughts on like what pops into your mind in these opening lines.
I've literally had, and I don't want to make fun of the Trotskyists, but it's a lot of Trotskyists. I've literally had them come up and like start spouting off a bunch of nonsense and trying to impress me with their knowledge of, history and politics and economics. And I'm just like, dude, I know this.
This is literal. This is a literal line to you. This is a literal experience.
It has literally happened to me, and it has happened to women around me. And I'm like, this isn't going to work. Like, I don't know what you're trying to do, but also, and this was, again, I was at this point where I was like hyper, I don't know, like I don't like to say it like it's in the past or it's like a particular time, but like I was like, fuck the patriarchy, my sexuality is my sexuality, and like if you want to fuck and that is all you want, then you need to say that. And I might say no, but like don't waste either of our time pretending that I'm stupid or that you're stupid or that you're some sort of knight in shining armor. Just fucking say what you want.
Can I comment on that?
Accept the consequences. Yes.
Because like that is a thing where men have this inability to come across as being good. Do you know what I mean? We're like obsessed with other people thinking that that's a good guy. So in order to say like, I just want to have sex, that makes us seem, in our minds, insensitive, which we cannot allow to happen. So then what we do is we do this big old song and dance about appearing sensitive and getting sex in that manner. And then what happens is after it's over, then men become emotionally withdrawn and like punishingly absent mentally and emotionally. So they come at it from such an inauthentic manner, and then they wind up hurting the person far more than if they have just said, let's just have sex tonight and like, let's just enjoy it. So that's a really interesting dynamic that you just kind of laid out there.
Yeah. And it's interesting because, the refusing to be a man episode, and we were talking about like how feminism is for everybody and the patriarchy hurts everybody. It's a perfect example, because the reason that you can't say, I just want to have sex, I am a human being who is like actually programmed to some degree to want physical connection, whether it's sexual or whatever. We want intimacy, but we can't say that we want intimacy because social norms have constructed and conditioned us to believe that there's some sort of like process that has to happen. Particularly like the nonsense around like getting married, or I mean, if you want to get married, but I just mean like the idea that sex is somehow attached to these processes is just ridiculous. Or that like sex is limited to people who are like 16 or what, like we spend so much time trying to stop teenagers from having sex, or like not thinking about older people who still engage in sexual activity because we have these ideas about it. But the reality is that like patriarchy forces conditions where men believe that their best chance of getting laid or having sex or having any intimacy, because frankly that's part of the patriarchy as well, is that men can't ask for non-sexual intimacy. That's got its own issues attached to it. But you know, if you can't say that you just want it, so then you cope in the way that you need to cope, and you go through the process that you've been conditioned to go through, and then you disappear, or you're not interested in relationship, but you can't say that, so it's like the ghosting or the like, you know, all of that. And on the other hand, women are also conditioned to not admit that they want to have sex, which is just, again, it's like ridiculous. We also aren't taught about like masturbation or self-stimulation or anything, which is another whole fucking shit show, because a lot of people would probably avoid a lot of really shitty relationships if they just learned how to masturbate. That said, you know, women are shamed for being sexual. They're shamed for showing an interest in sex. Women were literally, and in many countries around the world still are, told that they're not allowed to have sex outside of marriage. They're not allowed, like they're literally not allowed to show sexual attraction, that, you know, they are to do their duty to their husband, irrelevant of whether or not they're actually interested in doing it at this particular time or ever with that person. So women don't know how to be honest and forthright either. And obviously not all men, not all women. People can yell at me if they want.
Of course.
But it's both sides. The patriarchy tells men that they can't ask, and it tells women that they can't say that they're even interested outside of some sort of bullshit, you know, constructed relationship. And again, relationships are great. They're good. But not when the only reason you're getting into a relationship is because you have sexual impulses.
Yeah. Well, and that's a reason why this song blew my mind so much in 2001, is because like it's about a person. So it's a character created by a male songwriter. Okay. So we have men writing this song. So it's a character that is created, but this is like a really authentic portrait of a person, a presentation of a person. I know that it's a nameless woman, and I know, oh, it's a puppy, and I know that it's like a, you know, a nameless character, but it's a really, really different thing that I had ever been exposed to in songwriting ever.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's made up. I mean, it might be. Again, I did think about like asking and just like putting it out there, like, hey dudes, is this
you
a real
this person?
Yeah, because I know a couple of women who would fit this bill from Winnipeg at the time.
I know a couple as well who are friends of mine, and I'm like, you are such an impressively honest person, and you really inspire me with your honesty. Like, it's so refreshing when you meet people that you know that they are 100% telling you the truth every time their mouth opens. And I'm like, wow, this is incredible.
Yeah, I find it really frustrating when people don't, which is like all the time, but and I overshare all the time, and not from my perspective oversharing, but like socially. I do. If I know things, I can't not say them. So, you know, if it's an abortion debate that I hear, or like some sort of prudery, I'm like, I had an abortion. I don't give a fuck. Like, I mean, I obviously do give a fuck. It was a very serious time and I made the good decision, but like, I'll happily tell you.
You don't hide it.
No, you want to know about my fucking menstrual cycle? Sure. Sex? I'll talk about it. You want to talk like anything. There is no, my childhood trauma, happy to do that, because our problems start and end where we cannot ask for intimacy and we cannot be vulnerable. And so we construct all of these bullshit systems, and give away all of our power to hide the fact that we want intimacy. And that it's just fucking stupid. I mean, I say it that way, and that's terrible. People and trauma is complicated. It's not that you're stupid if you're feeling traumatized, but it's if you actually step back and look at all of the things we put in place to put between ourselves, and the things or the people that we care about, it's absurdism.
Wow. This is hard stuff to talk about. Like, and so many relationships die because people are unwilling to say these things that you and I are saying over the internet. Like, we've hung out a couple
of times. It's a lot
times.
harder when you know people, though. It's a lot harder to say it to a person you know, to be fair.
Totally. But like, this is how marriages end. You know what I mean? Like, the inability the inability to say these kinds of things to your life partner that you have chosen to be with. This is where things break down and fall apart. So that's why this is so fascinating to me. We've got these next lines. 3 more rounds, subject changes. She lays it down. Fuck Larry Flint, campaign to silence women who stand up and fight back. Like, do you have any thoughts on the whole like inclusion of Larry Flint and his
really...
he's the needle dick later on in the song about the First Amendment and the selective use of the First Amendment, blah blah blah. So I'm curious on your thoughts of the inclusion of Larry Flint within this song.
So going back to what we talked about before, around like the repression, victim feminism, this idea that like these women who had worked to have sexual freedom and to be promiscuous if that was their choice, to have control of their own reproductive rights, were followed by reactionary, I don't mean reactionary in a bad way, I just mean like in reaction to that, there was these women who did come off as repressed. And the media likes to support current systems of power, even when they're left-leaning or progressive. They tend to support the systems that keep them in place. So the stories of feminism that were being talked about post, at this time in the early 2000s, the ones that were being reported on were the repressed feminists. They were the feminists. They weren't the women who were like in the 70s. They were put to with the hippies. The 70s free love, that wasn't feminism. That was the hippies. So feminists were constructed for the mainstream as being repressed, as being man-hating, as being only lesbians, burning their bras, like that type of myth that persists today.
Right.
So Larry Flint.
I love how you said his name and just burst into laughter.
For those who don't know, the publisher of Hustler, and for those who don't know, another version of Playboy, kind of very similar. He and I mean Hugh Hefner did too, and a lot of other people. They argued that they were actually promoting feminism and women's empowerment, by allowing them to be sexually free, by posting pictures of them naked. Because I mean, like, if you go back to Regency era, Victorian era, like an ankle was considered like super risque. You couldn't let a man touch your hands without gloves on, because apparently flames of sexuality would just burst out and the whole society would fall apart. So Larry Flint is mentioned in this song, but really there was a lot of media involved folks, magazines, television shows, whatever, that were pushing this idea that like sexuality was something that was promoting women's rights. But again, it's the choice that's a woman's right. It's not the kind of gluttony of over-sexualized, overstimulated kind of situation. So Larry Flint tried to argue, and did so successfully, created an entire movement and a whole group of people that argued that, and I was one of them, I'm not going to lie. I mean, I didn't buy into Larry Flint per se, but I did very much was like, fuck you, sexuality is fun and I'm going to do this. And I like Playboy, and I don't see why women shouldn't be naked. And if some dude is interested in that and gets sexually stimulated, that's not on me. They're going to do that whether I walk down the street, or I can't control how other people react. But of course, the other side of that is like, yeah, you can. You cannot take part in a culture that, a lot of the women that are involved in Playboy are the same women who are involved in strip clubs, and the same women that are involved in pornography, who are there. Some are there, I'm sure, because they actually enjoy that work. But a lot of them are traumatized. A lot of them are coming from places of, they need the money, they need the the recognition, like mental health issues of needing that, like the only thing that they believe is good about themselves is their looks. And so they pursue careers and lifestyles that do that. But I mean, like that is their choice, but it's also patriarchal pressure that's leading them to that. Like they should have more choices. They should believe that they have more worth than what they look like in the centerfold. So Larry Flint is an interesting character, but that's what happens. Feminism has discourse. The mainstream patriarchy says, cool, let's use that. So they used women's desire to have their freedom of sexuality to sell patriarchal products and to reinforce ideas of women as existing for the objectification and for the pleasure of men. I read this cool thing the other day. It was a meme, so it's not like I'm not telling you anything academic here, but it talked about how for men, sex is all about taking, and for women, it's all about giving. So you save your virginity, you give yourself to your husband. It's the way the language is constructed. It's all about women giving something over, and men, it's all about taking pleasure, taking someone's virginity. So we have this idea, this overarching social idea that sex is about a power dynamic, and it doesn't have to be. It can just actually be about intimacy, but we don't know how to do that. So we can misconstrue sexual impulses as the desire to be dominated. And actually Paglia, she said that too. She said that every woman she might pretend she wants to be frigid and cold, and this isn't a direct quote, but every woman harbors a secret fantasy of being dominated by a man, is the not stated end of that sentence.
How do you feel about the very, very pro-orgasm lines in the song where a woman is essentially standing in a bar telling people, like, this is what I want? Like, how do you feel about those?
Orgasms are good. I mean, like, I think, again, I'm not Propagandhi. I don't know what they were thinking when they wrote this, but and you did earlier mention the fact that like some people found this really cringy, and I think part of why they find it cringy is because there's a little bit of repression in there. And repression's not bad. Repression is a choice, although we do use the word in a way that implies something's being held down or restricted, and that's where the word comes from, I guess. But the idea, I fuck to come. Like, if you tell me, if you're a person who says that you fuck for any other reason, then you've either never actually orgasmed, or sex has been something that you do solely for procreation, right? So there's lots of people who go through fertility treatments, and it's just like, we aren't here anymore for that. We're here to try and make this baby, Yeah. So I guess there are a few instances where it's not true, but like everyone fucks to come. The thing is, women were not constructed as actually having any desire to do that. And what's fucked? So there's a book called The Height Report. It was like a report that was done on women's health. And it was kind of just a whole bunch of stuff about women's health that was published. I can't remember when, 60s-ish, maybe. So this may be something that everyone knows. I don't know. Maybe this is common knowledge, but the word hysteria, which is my favorite Muse song, but the word hysteria actually comes from the same root word as hysterectomy. So it relates to the uterus. And hysteria was actually diagnosed by doctors through the 50s and 60s, and possibly earlier, I don't know, but women were hysterical if they complained, if they were feminists, if they complained that they felt restricted in their life, if they complained that they could no longer take their husband's, domineering, if they complained that they wanted to like get out of the house and get away from children. A lot of times the doctor would literally, the medical establishment would diagnose them as having hysteria, which was a generalized disorder, not being willing to put up with your life. And the treatment for hysteria was manual stimulation of the clitoris. So the doctor would literally masturbate to the woman. I know. Yeah. So it's like, you're not getting enough sex. But they couldn't say to the woman, like, what you actually want is intimacy and sex. because women weren't constructed as being in control of their own sexuality. They weren't the subject of their sex lives. They were the object of someone else's sex lives. So instead, doctors would literally get women off, like in doctors' offices in stirrups.
Mind blowing. Well, and there's another book too that is insane. There's holy crap. There's another book that I read in the last couple of years called Becoming Clitorate, which is a sex research book about the orgasm gap between men and women, and about it. Like, a lot of the book is around how men see sex as being one thing, which is like what
penetration?
Penetration. Penis, vagina, penetration. And it's like this very, very limiting factor where it's extremely penis centric. And what that means is that there is this realm of sexuality that works for so many women out there that is different than just penetration. So what you wind up happening is the man is essentially, it's a totally selfish act, and it's not attending to what the woman actually finds as quote unquote the main event, which is how the book refers to it. So for men, the main event is extremely clear, and for women, the main event is totally different. But what happens is you have these married couples where the main event is never communicated between each other, and the man never really seeks the answer to their own partner's dissatisfaction, because their main event is completely fulfilled 100% of the time. And
I might argue with that, but sure.
There you go.
They might think it's fulfilled. They don't actually know what they're talking about. If you're relying on penetration, then you're losing, even as a man, you're losing more than half of the options of pleasure that exist. And
for sure,
like, there's no question. Especially if you are the only one penetrating as a man. This is not a podcast about sex. But
this is a song about sex, though.
It is, and I'm happy to talk about sex, but I could go off into directions. Yeah, it's a rabbit hole, and we'll retract. If people are interested in those things, I can certainly direct you to resources for healthy sexual like participation and whatnot. But the thing is, that is also about shame and patriarchy. That's the same thing, because I know as the woman in a heterosexual relationship, and several heterosexual relationships over the course of my 41 years, a lot of men just want to do it right. Like, it's not actually selfish. They just want to be good lovers, and so they don't know how to do that because conversations aren't happening about it, because pornography and the media really are just telling you that penetration is, as you say, the main event. You can't ask your mother. Every conversation I've ever had, and I had a couple, my mother wouldn't have sex conversations with me, so she had other people have them for her. It's so funny. If you ever met my mom, I'm here talking about sex and my mom is super repressed, and that's fine. She's also wonderful. We're very different.
It's very funny. It's very adorable.
Yeah. But the thing is, most people's sex conversations in modern times, and by modern times, let's say since the Second World War, I don't know, are about how to not get people pregnant, or since the 80s about how to avoid AIDS and STIs.
Yeah.
But it's not actually about sex. It's about the negative consequences, or the perceived
horrible
consequences of sex, right? So we pathologize sex. We make it this scary thing. We have all of these movies. I love movies. I love pop culture when it comes to I don't know, just stuff that's just ridiculous that I know isn't going to happen, right? Like all the 80s, 16 Candles movies and stuff. I look at them and I know that they're, sexist and probably racist and Western centric and whatever, but there's a nostalgia there for me. But all of those things teach us that sex is just about a man chasing a woman, the woman playing hard to get just long enough to pretend that she's not sexual and doesn't have any sort of interest, and has to be convinced of the worthiness or whatever, I don't know, of this particular man, and then it's about the kiss and the assumption of penetration.
Yeah.
So we literally don't teach kids, and we don't want to talk to kids about sex, because God forbid you should admit that, like, how much I don't mind talking about stuff, but like my family may have issues with me talking about them. But like, how many children, for those of you who have children, male children in particular, like, was it when they were 16 that they first had an erect penis? Because I doubt that.
Right.
Right. Like, I there's a problem if your child hasn't, noticed their own genitalia by the time they're like 3.
Right.
So, but we like to pretend that like children don't think of sex, and then all of a sudden, boom, you're 15, 16, and it's like, oh God, don't get pregnant, don't get an STI, don't do that, abstinence rings.
Yeah.
So how are you supposed to learn about masturbation or about all of the various ways that bodies actually work themselves or together? How are you supposed to learn about what you like and what you don't like if nobody actually tells you, and by the time you're actually having sex, you're terrified to actually admit that you have no idea?
Yeah, absolutely. That is the trend that happens. That's the cycle that we all fall into. And I think that a lot of people will resonate with that. If like by the time you're doing it, you have no idea what you're doing. You have no experience talking about it because it's been pathologized so much, as you mentioned. And then all of a sudden you are just flying blind almost into the situation where you know that you don't want to get a sexually transmitted disease. Like that's really all you know about it. And it's a terrifying thing.
It's terrifying. And for men, I assume, I don't know, you're a dude. It's even worse because you can't admit you're a virgin. For women, you're supposed to pretend you're a virgin for the rest of your life. But for men, you can't admit that you're a virgin. So everything is like, nah, I know what I'm doing. This is fine.
Right.
It's not like you can ask your friends or talk about, like the same way you would if you were, for the first time, like getting pimples or the first time you ever like shave your beard or something. It's not like you're like, oh, I did this, like I cut myself and first time. It's like, dear fucking God, don't let anyone know that like I literally am flying by the seat of my non-pants.
Yeah. And it's a scary experience growing up like that. And you can't also talk about, masturbation with men, because then you get shamed in middle school being like, you're the guy that did that. You know what I mean? Like, so
or all the fucking terrible stories, like the hairy hand stuff that they tell you, like you're gonna no.
Yeah. It's insane. Like I just had like these like horrible memories of things that happened in middle school and the conversations that happened in middle school. And that's really where all the bad stuff really starts happening. I'm just like getting like
cringy. And I think that's why the song is cringy. I think that's why people think this song is cringy. And if folks are listening and that's not why they find it cringy, and please Atlaxis me. I want to know why you find it cringy, but I do think that's what it is. I think they carry in, we all do it. We carry in our kind of other thoughts, other feelings, things that we're not even conscious that we're feeling at the time. And it is cringy to think about like that first time you had sex, or the first like 1,000 times or whatever, until you fucking figure it out. And it's even worse if you never figure it out.
Yeah. I mean, that's why I started reading those books. Like, I was older than 35 and I started reading these books and being like, wow, I learned so much by actually just being brave and being curious and wanting to know more about these topics that I feel like I'm completely stunted in. Like, it's all about being open and curious and being interested in learning more about these things that we've been scared to learn about our entire lives, that have been pathologized and mythologized in our minds. And just being open to to new information, being like older, like, and being like, well, I still have a lot to learn, and doing it is really empowering, especially for me,
I got really lucky because I have an uncle who's, he's only 10 years older than me. He's 50. And he's queer. So I was introduced to queer communities really young, like in the early 90s. I was hanging out in queer communities as a kid. And as I got older, I was comfortable in those communities. So when I moved to Toronto, I found those communities. And there was a lot of conversations that were really openly had about how one has sex in ways that are not solely penetration oriented. And I found my way to various like if you go to the right sex shops. So I'm not talking about the ones that necessarily sell like latex and dominance, although no issues with S&M. I'm talking about, in if you're in Halifax or Ottawa, Venus Envy is a spot that you can go to where they just know everything. It's like, I don't know if they train their people or if they hire people that already know, but they sell a lot of gear, but they also are very pro-sex, sex positive, very open to discussing like how to use things, how the body works. There's workshops. Find places like that, and I was lucky enough to find those really early, and so now I'm like 20 years later, who wants to talk about sex? Yeah.
Do you like this song, Ladies Night in Loserville?
Yeah. Except for the like dissonance. I don't like the sound. I don't like the I feel like it sounds like somebody's like, when you have a really obnoxious neighbor who's playing like music on the other side of the wall, and you're just like, you actually would like the music if it just wasn't like that kind of hazy through the wall, kind of too much drum and bass.
Sure.
Yeah?
That makes a lot of sense, actually.
Yeah, that's how I feel about Today's Empires. I feel like it just it's like it's listening through water. There's some sort of barrier where nothing's coming through really clear, and I need it to be clearer. So I do like the song, and I'm looking forward to the remix where hopefully it's clearer.
So Mary, I have a theory here. For the 3 episodes that you're on, Refusing to Be a Man, Fuck Machine, Ladies Night in Loserville, I see these as a trilogy exploring Chris's exposure to various kinds of feminism throughout his life, and it's a topic that he continues to revisit. And he does it on Tartuffe in Victory Lap as well. So it's a topic that continues to come up. And I'm wondering if you see these sort of as like a trilogy storyline for the episodes that you've appeared on.
I don't know if I'd say it's a storyline, just because I don't, like we said, we don't really know who these people are.
Sure.
And they could just be examples or whatever. So I don't know if I agree with that, but it's definitely a narrative. And it's definitely a narrative that speaks to what the band was experiencing, what they were listening to, what they were interested in terms of feminism. Like I said, the first one, so not the first episode I was on, but in chronological order, Fuck Machine is really about that internal discourse in feminism that was happening about whether women's liberation is best served by repression or open sexuality. And I think that song kind of comes down a little hard on the shaming women who are repressed, not realizing that like sometimes, a lot of times, repression is required for safety or for economic stability or whatever. And in an ideal world, we'd say fuck the economics and fuck capitalism and go off and do our own thing. But like we all know that that's not actually how the world works, because there's individual choices that lead to freedom, but there's also structural pushback. So that's the first song. The second song would be Refusing to Be a Man. And that's recognizing, I think, and it's important because I complained about Fuck Machine. I said, it's only part of the conversation. And I think Refusing to Be a Man is another part of the conversation, which is, it's not just about what women do. It's not just about, whether women make a choice to be sexual or quote unquote repressed. Of course, repression could mean that you're just saving it for the bedroom and you're not putting it out there into the whole world. And there's all kinds of stuff around that, around religion and social expectations and whatnot. But Refusing to Be a Man is saying, like, I get it. It's not actually just what you do and whether or not you put it out there. It's also about how I respond to it and what I do and what I put out there. So, the idea that you recognize that you're conditioned to be attracted to a certain thing. Like I said, paintings had very round bodies, thick thighs, women, like the Venus de Milo or whatever that one is literally like this woman who's probably like in today's terms, like bigger than, what would be considered acceptable by standards of beauty, which is a whole other conversation.
Yeah.
Marilyn Monroe was bigger. She was considered a sex symbol and was bigger. Twiggy in the 60s was tiny. So what is considered attractive for women has changed, and what is attractive been attractive for men over time has changed. So it's an important part of the conversation. Interesting side note also, high heels were originally worn by men, not women, because rich aristocrats thought that it would give wearing high heels, which was something the cavalry, the military, horse riding military wore, would give them some sort of like vigor. So they started wearing them, and then women started wearing them to keep up with the men in terms of height and fashion. And then once women started wearing them, the men were like, no, that's too feminine. Also, the color blue up until the early 1900s was only for young unmarried women, and the color pink was because it is the color of genitalia. It was for men to show their aggressive dominance. So the things we find attractive and okay in terms of gender change drastically over time, and they are socially constructed. Obviously, hormones still matter and our biology matters, but we're constructed, and refusing to be a man recognizes that. And I think that's an important part of the conversation. And then for Lazy's Night in Loserville, you and I were talking outside of this, and I was reading your kind of plan for what we were going to do today. And you, Greg likes plans, guys.
I
and
plan like
also,
crazy.
Yeah, and it's important. It's better than I don't plan. I just randomly ramble. But you were saying, like, I don't know if maybe you want to talk about it, but like your feelings on the I fuck to come section.
Oh man, those lines blew me away. Like,
yeah,
like I was like 17 when I heard this, right? And so it's hard for me to talk about like how important this particular lyric was for me, but it really does. It showed me like I was kind of referring to earlier about the penis centricity of male sexuality and how we are so inwardly concerned with our own orgasm in a lot of ways that it leads a lot of, people's sexual experiences. It leads to just lots and lots of disappointment and so much limitation that like is imposed upon us, and we don't really know how to break out of that. So whenever I see this person, this woman who, because I'd never really heard these lines from like a
out loud.
female, right? I've never heard like these words from like a female point of view before about owning their sexuality unapologetically and being like, the purpose of my sexuality is to orgasm, is like this experience of pleasure that I have within this human body in this very limited time that I'm on this earth. I would like for this to be good for me. And so it was really jarring for me, and I've thought about it endlessly since this record came out 20 years ago. But it was very inspiring because it made me want to be a good partner, be a good sexual partner who actually cared about the other person and not just being like inwardly concerned about, my own sexual experience or things like that. Because I think that what that does is whenever a guy is focusing on their inward stress and anxiety will build, and that will make them a very, very selfish and detached lover because they're concerned so much about their own importance that it doesn't concern the other person as much. And then it just becomes almost like a solo experience in a lot of ways. So that's something that I think about a lot when this song comes about. And I'm still processing how I feel about this, which is the reason why I procrastinated this song for the last year and a half, because this is something that I'm very much processing in real time right now.
Yeah, I love that that's your perspective on it, because I don't believe that there's a natural difference between men and women when it comes to sex drive or when it comes to, interest in intimacy. Obviously, there's differences between people, period. And there's, generally categories of gender, there's going to be differences between them. But I do think that because of the way we're conditioned, women see things very differently than men versus trans people or whatnot. And when I read this line, This is the line that actually put all three of these songs together for me. So I was going to talk about it earlier, but I figured toward here would be better. So the first song is about repression versus sexuality. It's about, what we're doing as women in reaction to patriarchy and how we're claiming our own space. The second song is about how men need to take some responsibility for their part, and not only their part in patriarchy, but their part in reproducing their own oppression, as do women, no question, which I think the first song is about women talking about how do we take responsibility for our own oppression? Like, how do we make things better? We can't just be victims. It can't be victim feminism. It has to be, we have power and we have to use it and prove that we have it and take what we need as power. I think this song is actually a woman saying, listening to a bunch of men and a la Larry Flint saying that, like, women who don't like Playboy, women who don't, do the free love thing, those people are repressed, and they're the feminazis who ruin feminism by bringing their prudish, anti-femininity, bra burning lesbianism to the party. They hate men, and they're feminazis, right? Comparing us to, like, the Holocaust, which makes, that it's the greater internet fuckwad theory. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but every argument on the internet ends with somebody saying Hitler. I think that's what it is, or I could be wrong. The fuckwad theory might just be that everyone on the internet thinks that they have a voice and uses it. Anyway, so this woman is looking at these people having this discussion about, like, what's best for women, and I assume that they're talking about how repressed feminists are, because that's when she turns around and says, don't lay this feminazi bullshit on me, right? Just because I believe that I have the right to cover my body. This conversation happens a lot with Islamophobia, whether or not women are repressed because they're covering their hair or wearing burqas or whatever. And we can have that discussion, but really it's their choice. And that's the point of feminism. It's their choice. I will help them if they actually need help, but I can't determine for them that they need help. Likewise, if you are wearing, covering your body and wearing, like, stockings and still, in the middle of summer, fully covered, or aren't comfortable talking about sex or whatever, that's not repression. That's your choice. That's who you are. And while it could come off as repression, it might be the result of repression, it's still you got to do what makes you comfortable. So that my reading of this song is actually that this woman is listening to these men talking about how, like, Playboy is awesome and it allows women to, or not Playboy, Hustler, sorry Larry, Playboy and Hustler are awesome, and they free women, and women should go out and do these things to prove that they are no longer repressed and under the thumb of men, and that they can even control men. That conversation happened. Women can control men with their sexuality, so there's no such thing as patriarchy, because men are tied to their penises and dragged around by their sexuality, apparently. So when it says I fuck to come, I don't think that's actually generalized. I think what they're saying here is, don't tell me I'm repressed. Just because I don't want to fuck you doesn't actually mean that I'm repressed. Just because I don't flaunt my sexuality, just because I don't allow my sexuality to be objectified or commercialized, just because I want what's best for all women, even if those women come off as repressed to you, doesn't mean that when it comes right down to it, I fuck to come. I'm not having sex to please any particular person other than myself. And I think that's an important part of the song, because they're literally comparing, feminazis. You don't want to have sex with me? It's because you're a feminazi. You don't want to, come to this concert wearing the tiniest skirt ever and high heels and, like, fashion? Feminazi. That kind of thing, right? So I think that this song actually completes the Propagandhi commentary on second, early third wave feminism, saying, like, just because you read me a certain way doesn't mean that I'm not still all about women's liberation, and I'm not still all about, the liberation of all people, to have the right to do what they need to do, right? Don't judge the book by its cover.
Amazing. Well, Mary, what an amazing conversation. I'm going to learn a lot whenever I re-listen to this interview. I'm just so pumped that you're my friend, and that you want to hang out with us and talk about these very challenging ideas. Like I'm learning so much, and I'm going to be 38 in a couple of weeks. So like I am looking at like the second half of my life, so to speak. And I feel like I am still learning so much about these topics, and talking about it, especially publicly on a podcast where people will actually listen to it, is it's hard. It's a little stressful. But you've just made this so enjoyable and fun and natural for me that I can feel my own confidence surging in my own ability to talk about these ideas. You know what I mean?
That's good. And I think there's like a Buddhist monastery really, really near here, a couple hours away, that's really popular. Pema Chowdhury used to run it. She's like a popular writer. Yeah. And she has this thing that she does with her, I don't know, students, where she talks about concentric circles. And now I talk about it all the time because I think it's really important. So there's the tiny circle in the center, and that's where we're comfortable. That's our like Netflix and chill. Don't go out of our way, do the things we're comfortable doing, talk to the people we've always known that we're comfortable with. That's the circle that a lot of people want to live in. And then there's a circle that's kind of wider, and that's the space where we learn. That's the space where we're kind of familiar, it's people we kind of know. It's things we have transferable skills in, maybe that we, right? But we still have place to learn there, and there's a lot of discomfort. And then there's the big circle, which is like you're gonna fucking drown trying to swim the English Channel. You just learned to swim yesterday. You can't do that. Give it some time, right?
Yeah.
The cool thing about the circles is that they change and grow. So if you spend your entire life, and I think a lot of people do this, seeking comfort and not having uncomfortable conversations and not challenging what you think you believe to be true and not taking part in discourse, even if it turns out you were wrong, which I've been wrong so many times. I could be wrong 15 times on here or more.
Yeah.
But
who knows?
If you don't have those conversations, you never actually grow. But it's worse than that. You don't just not grow, you shrink, because as you get older, the things that you're familiar with end, right? Like I used to hate DVDs. I used to hate them so bad. I was like, give me fucking VHS or give me death.
Yeah.
And so, if I'd never done that, like I couldn't watch any of the fucking movies that I like anymore. And then if I'd held on to DVDs, I'd be screwed, because like now Netflix or whatever the hell people watch, right? But technology changes. So if you never actually learn to grasp anything new, then like you can no longer move on with the world, and you lose the ability to take part in it. People will die that people will move away. Your job might get change. Like you have to grow, or else your circle and therefore your mental health shrinks, it suffers. But if you actually go the other way, if you spend most of your time in the middle circle, where you're constantly, as you've suggested, learning to grow, trying new things, being uncomfortable, and there's lots of, it probably doesn't seem that way because I've just talked about like bodily whatever, but there's lots of things that make me uncomfortable, and yet that's the stuff that I lean into, because that's where I'm going to actually grow. That's where I learn who I am. That's how I learn what I value. That's how I learn what the people that I care about value, and that's how I build intimacy. So the middle circle is a cool place to hang out, but you can't skip the middle circle, because if you jump to like, I just got my feet wet yesterday and now I'm swimming the English Channel, you're probably going to die unless you get super lucky and a boat picks you up.
Yeah.
But if you do spend the time in the middle circle, then your comfortable circle, instead of shrinking, grows. So the middle circle becomes your comfortable circle. And that circle that was impossible becomes something that is very attainable, and the outer circle grows. So I often, when I teach yoga, I tell people that I'm like, just keep trying. It doesn't actually matter if you get anywhere, you won't regress, as long as you're careful. And it's incredibly important that we do this in terms of our social organizing, because words change. I talk to kids all the time who are coming out as trans or pansexual or bi or just like super okay with their sexuality in high school, like already knowing about masturbation or feminism or critical race theory at an age that I would never have known it. And they teach me things because the language changes, the culture changes, and if we don't shift with it, if we don't have these uncomfortable conversations, then there literally is no hope because we're all in our bubbles, sad and alone.
Mary, that is so inspiring. And I think that a lot of people will walk away from that thinking about their comfort bubbles and how to live a little bit more maybe in that second bubble. Fabulous. Well,
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming back for your second and third appearances on Unscripted Moments, a podcast about Propagandhi. I just feel so lucky. And like I said, I'm just glad you're my friend, and I'm glad that we can hang out and have these totally amazing conversations that push me a little bit, and hopefully the listeners will benefit from too. So thank you for being here.
I'm all about let's have a Propagandhi podcast meeting. Chris Hanna, if you're listening, you have to have another October 3-day show. And let me actually come when it's not COVID and traveling doesn't suck. I would love to have like a giant Propagandhi fan hang out. Maybe Chris might want to come with me. It's so cool.
So, this guy wants to know what's going on in the room. What's going on in the room? What's that? The world is going down fucking hill. That's what's going on in the fucking world. No kidding. Hey.
Not till 2100. That's when the Earth's temperature rises 6 degrees and methane hydrogen is released at an enormous rate and global warming.
Dwayne Larson, welcome to Unscripted Moments, a podcast about Propagandhi.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Dwayne, we are delighted to have you here. We're going to talk about so many fantastic stories about like Winnipeg and Propagandhi. It's going to be fabulous. But to kick us off here, can you go ahead and sort of introduce yourself to the audience, however you see fit, so people out there know who you are and what you do?
You know, I guess I'm many things, but the thing that I love doing and that keeps me the busiest is I'm a full-time photographer, freelance photographer. I do everything from weddings to no, I don't do baby photos, family photos, sure. And then the thing that I love doing, sometimes I get paid for, sometimes I don't, is music photography, which is kind of why we're talking.
Yeah.
And I mean, as you know, it's been sorely missed. So
yeah,
hopefully, but yeah, that's kind of, and I do podcasts as well. So
let's talk about those podcasts real quick. So you have It's a Music Thing, a music podcast, and
yes.
You also have another one called Filters Removed, which is about
Yes.
photography. Tell me a little bit about your various podcast projects.
It's a Music Thing I've been doing now for I don't even know what episode. I'm approaching the 80th episode.
Cool.
I think comes out once a week, every Friday, or I try to get it out every Friday. Depends how lazy I feel. You know what it's like,
dude. It's brutal.
Things get busy.
Yeah.
And I talk to all sorts of folks. I kind of got over the fact that people always talk to the artists, which is great. And I love it. And I like talking to those people too. But I really love delving behind the music, if you want to get that way, and talking to promoters, talking to booking agents, talking to record label owners, talking to merch people, tour managers, all that kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
there's no real, and I kind of do a deep dive on every guest I talk to, starting from my first question is always, do you remember the first time you heard music that wasn't like a lullaby or a nursery rhyme that where it really stuck with you? And then we just kind of go to where we go. And then Filters Removed is all about photography. No specific genre, but the basic premise me and my friend Mel did. She came to me with this idea, and we get other photographer stories and we read them anonymously. So because we've seen some weird shit.
Yeah.
And you don't ever want to, put yourself in the position of losing clients or singling them out if it's something, not so cool, but it's a funny story. So we share our own stories, and then we share other people's stuff anonymously, just so that, because they're funny. They're super funny.
I love it. You just mentioned something really interesting about like behind the scenes of music. And, as we were talking about earlier, one of my favorite conversations that I've had with this show is Katrin Vipper, who is Propagandhi's European tour booking agent and tour manager. And like seeing the behind the scenes stories are it's just so fantastic. Like I love talking to musicians, obviously, but like the people who have this little ecosystem under the surface of what you see for that hour that a band is on stage. It's just such an interesting lifestyle. And I think that the reason audiences and listeners connect with that so much is because we all like to imagine ourselves living different lives. You know what I mean? Like, what if I was the traveling light guy for like Bad Religion, you know what I mean? And like my entire life was setting up lighting rigs and running these shows and making sure that I hit those lighting filters and everything at the right time, set the atmosphere and the mood.
Yeah.
I love stories like that. And I think that you do too. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Like I've talked to Barney, Propagandhi sound guy, because he also works at the venue that I shoot for. And man, some of the stories he has from not even Propagandhi stories, but there was a venue in Winnipeg here called the Zoo. I think Randy may have mentioned it on.
I've heard of it. Yeah,
but it was gnarly. It was kind of ran by a gang, and this was before my time. This is before I just went to it. I didn't really know.
Yeah,
but like some of the stuff he said he saw, I don't know if he could repeat publicly because it was pretty gnarly.
Yeah. And I mean, whenever you say things like that, what if you implicate yourself or somebody in something where there's like not a statute of limitations in place for it? You know what I mean? And like you can, like that's scary business. Like one of my favorite novels is called After Dark by Haruki Murakami. And it talks about like what happens when the sun goes down, how like the city becomes a new place. And I think about that kind of stuff all the time. And I used to work at a venue in Columbia, Missouri called the Blue Note. And we sometimes would stay at the Blue Note after the show would end. And then you would say, well, I'm heading home, everybody. And you would open the door to leave and the sun would be coming up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The lifestyle of, flipping that day and night routine is such an interesting way of seeing the world for a while. It wasn't for me long term.
Yeah.
But like I've seen behind the curtain, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm the same way.
It's so cool. Well, you also mentioned how you ask people, what is your first memory of hearing music that wasn't like a lullaby or something that was sung to you on like Sesame Street or whatever?
Yeah.
What's your story like that for Propagandhi?
Oh man, it's been so long now. It would probably be, I was thinking about this and how and when I heard Prop for the first time. And my first one, I think like a lot of folks, would be Nation States on Survival of the Fattest. And yeah, that's the right one. Yeah. I'm trying to think. I'm like, is it fat music for fat people or is it nope, Survival of the Fattest?
Nice.
And that really grabbed me because it's just so fast and so good, and it was unlike anything else on that comp. And so then I picked up Let's Talk More Rock, and then I got How to Clean Everything. So that's kind of the era that I came in. But I think it would be Nation States.
Nice, nice. How did you sort of come to realize that they were a special and unique band? Like, do you remember thinking about their stuff like in the months and years after you were first exposed to them, where you started to be like, whoa, this is like more than just some of this other stuff that I'm hearing?
For me, it was a lot that, I mean, I grew up in a small town in southeast Saskatchewan called Estevan, or mostly grew up. I grew up on a farm and then we moved there. Make a very long story short.
Yeah.
It's about 10,000 people, it's an oil field centric town.
Okay.
You know, the MXPX song, Small Town, Small Minds.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. That's that town in a nutshell. And then when I heard Prop and when I really started delving into them, it was one of those things where, I mean, I had to look up certain things. I'm old, so I had to look up certain things in the dictionary.
Yeah.
And to see what they were talking about. But for me, I'm not a religious person, and I forget the name. I'm terrible at song names. But with the one where they're like, fuck religion.
Haile Selassie.
Yeah. And also I didn't want to like totally butcher saying that name. So
yeah.
Thank you.
No, that's fine.
it really struck a chord, and just all of their stuff, they don't really hide behind like metaphors and like stuff like that. It was, especially the first 3 albums, all of them. It's really in your face. They're, you know, they're not apologetic about it. They say what they mean and they stand by those words. And that's what really drew me in, because and if you want to get flowery and whatever with writing, that's great. I enjoy that as well, but just that straight ahead, like just kind of fuck you attitude. That's what really drew me into them.
You know, I love when Saskatchewan comes up on this show, because I did my master's degree in Saskatoon. So I grew up in the American Midwest in Missouri, and through a long series of random occurrences, I found myself living in Saskatoon. And, you know, Todd is from Regina. And so, you know, I've got this like this ingrained like Western Canada prairie mentality experience that sort of like is some of the most formative years of my life that I spent was, you know, studying for a master's at U of S. And I love when Saskatchewan comes up on this show, but how does somebody find Fat Records CDs in the 90s in Estevan, Saskatchewan?
I mean, it would have been through, because when I moved from our farm to Estevan, I played hockey, and one of the guys on our hockey team was like the punk rocker. He had a band. The band, for anybody that cares, you're never going to find the CD. I still have it, but the band was called 3 on 1.
Okay.
And he really got me into punk rock music. So, I mean, like a lot of people's kind of punk rock origin stories, you know, Green Day, for a lot of people my age, that was the jumping off point.
It was for me personally.
Yeah, for a lot of folks. And then you fall down the rat hole of this wonderful music genre. But he was getting me into stuff like Screeching Weasel, the Mr. T Experience, just other stuff. And then, you know, that all kind of came full circle. And then pretty much anything that said Fat or Epitaph on it at the time, it's like, yeah, I you couldn't listen to them. You couldn't, there was no Spotify, there was no iTunes. You had to like either take a chance or be like, oh, it's on this label. That's a punk rock label. Let's get that. So
yeah, I love that you brought up Green Day too, because, you know, one of our recent guests, Mikey Erg, did Going to Passalaqua on his new record, and that's an awesome cover. And he was on our Government Cartoons episode. And then I'm thinking back on a story of when I first heard music in the way that you ask your guests about, and it was sitting in the back seat of my friend Kyle's dad's car, listening to the radio. Kyle was in the front seat. I was in the back seat. His dad was driving, and we were leaving basketball practice, and Basket Case came on the radio, and we were like 11, and Kyle knew all the words. And I was in the back seat like, dude, he's like riding in the car with his dad singing this song. Like he knows all the words. Like his dad's so cool for letting us listen to this in the car. And that is like the one thing that sticks with me. And it was just all, you know, all game on from there for me personally. So that's my story.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. I remember when Green Day came out, and I always joke because like the first CDs I bought were, and I think I got them through Columbia House way back in the day, was Brooks and Dunn.
Yep.
Because I still to this day, I love 80s, 90s, old country.
Sure.
Love it. Love it. And then have you ever heard of a guy named Snow?
No.
Oh, you don't want to.
Don't know Snow.
No, Snow was a Canadian artist, and he's this white guy, but sings like kind of like in a Jamaican reggae-y, rappy. I'll send you a link for Snow. It's
Sweet.
bad,
Love
but
it.
those were the first two. And then my first punk rock CD was I got it Pennywise, About Time.
Nice.
And that's to this day. It was 3 years ago I went down to LA to do 3 nights of Pennywise, mostly because they're doing their first 3 albums, playing them in entirety.
Yeah.
But all the openers for those bands were like the Bouncing Souls, Death by Stereo, Union 13. And I'm like, I like Pennywise fine, but all those openers, I'm like, I'm sold. This has got to happen.
Awesome. I love it. Well, my first Pennywise was Unknown Road, and I don't remember how I got it, but it was that's stuck with me forever. And I actually have a copy of Pennywise Unknown Road on vinyl where it has the spelling mistake on the back cover. So
Nice.
that's one that I'm going to hang on to for a while, I think.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's go back to Propagandhi. I love these random music conversations, and I'm curious about seeing Propagandhi live. So you're living in Saskatchewan, growing up. When did you start seeing them live? And I'm curious about these experiences.
The first time that it really sticks out in my head, because I maybe had seen them in Regina, because we had to drive 2 hours to Regina to get to any big shows before I started doing shows in Estevan. But the first time I think I remember seeing Propagandhi, and I can dig the poster out because I still have the poster. I still have the hoodie, was their the album release for Today's Empires, Tomorrow's Ashes at the U of M. I always get the U of M and the U of W mixed up, but I think it was the University of Manitoba.
Okay.
With I forget who. Oh yeah, there it is. Oh look, I just happen to have it. So
I love it. There it is.
There it is.
Holy smokes.
It was when did this say? So yeah, they had 60 stories, a collective called the Fermented Reptile Collective, and then a thrash band called Malfaction.
Oh yeah, I have that. The Malfaction's on that Systematic Destruction 7-inch compilation where there's the Oka Everywhere version as well. And
it was the University of Manitoba, the multi-purpose room.
You should send me a picture of that poster so that I can put it up on social media, so that whenever we freak out about seeing it and I say, oh, there it is, people can actually have a chance to look at it. So maybe I'll stick that up on Instagram and Twitter and stuff. Awesome.
Yeah, for sure. But that would have been the first time I saw them and I came from Estevan, which is about 5 hours away.
Mm-hmm.
So I had friends, my actual best friend from high school moved here to go to university and then just stayed. So I kept coming to Winnipeg and I fell in love with the city. It's one of those things. It's like, well, it's like Saskatoon. It's kind of dirty. It's kind of gross, but then, and I always like to joke, when you polish up that turd a little bit, it's a beautiful city. The people are beautiful here. The arts community, the music community, it blows my mind. So I just kept coming here and I loved it. And then I think 13 years ago, I finally moved here.
Nice. So since you've been living there, tell me about seeing Propagandhi again live. Because I know that you've worked with them, but I'm curious, what other experiences you've had with seeing them live before we get into you working with them.
I mean, the other one that really stands out in my mind, and I'll show you the poster for this too, because
love it.
Like I said, I collected stuff, and this is
collector.
Actually, I'm a super collector, which is so nerdy. But I actually, and it would have been around the time in between Today's Empires and Oh, I'm so bad with album things. Not supporting cast, but Potemkin. Yes.
Yeah.
It was kind of that in between time, where they take 10 years off between album releases.
Yeah.
It was one of those years. They only played 3 shows that year, as far as I can remember.
Wow.
They played Portage la Prairie.
Mm-hmm.
They played Brandon.
Yeah.
Which 2 very small towns. And they played Estevan, Saskatchewan.
Wow.
Because I got them there.
Nice.
I fired off a random email to, I think it was G7. And I'm like, hey, I was doing shows. I'm like, I know this is probably a shot in the dark, but if you guys would ever, consider coming to Estevan, I would love to put on a show for you, blah, blah, blah. And then when I got the email back, it was one of those things. It's like, I had to rub my eyes and like look at it. And it was, I think it was Jord that I was dealing with via email.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, yeah, we'd love to come to Estevan. And I was just like, don't play with me now. Come on. And then they're like, yep, Barney got in touch with me and he's like, this is the sound system we need. Like, this is what we need to make it go. Here's where you can get it out of Regina. So ponied up my own money for that. And the show went and came so quickly. I don't remember a lot of it. I've got a picture of the big pile of money that I took in.
Yeah.
And then eventually gave to the bands because I didn't even have a contract. There was no guarantee. I just told the opening 2 bands, they get what they get and Propagandhi gets the rest. And I made maybe $50 on the show.
Yeah. I was going to say, did you lose a ton?
No, I didn't lose any, and this is.
Oh my God, that is awesome. Okay, what year is that? Because do you know what year that was?
Oh man, I'd have to look back. It was, yeah, I'd have to figure it out because I can't remember.
So was it a 4-piece or was it just the trio?
It was just a trio. It was just the 3 of them.
Amazing. How many people do you remember coming out to that show? Do you remember?
I think it was around 500 people.
Sweet. Dude, that's a great show.
There was folks coming from Winnipeg. There was folks coming from Calgary,
wow.
Coming up from the States because they didn't tour. Like they weren't touring that much. So, and I've still got a few of the ticket stubs kicking around somewhere too. Cause
my God, I absolutely love that. Okay. That is fabulous, Dwayne. Okay. So obviously that was your first time like working with the band. So, that was sort of like that. Was that like a launch pad for you becoming a photographer for their live events and stuff like that in the future?
I mean, it was definitely like a door opening there, like becoming friendly with them. I didn't really keep in touch with them after the show because I mean, I lived in Estevan. It didn't matter. Like they're in Winnipeg. But when I just kept shooting them. And like, what I love about what they do here is, I mean, their shows sell out in 5-10 minutes. They don't play huge venues. Like they're not playing the Burt, the 1,600 capacity room. They played there once and it was weird.
Mm-hmm.
Not bad, but it was just weird.
Do you mean the Burton Cummings, like where the Weaker Thans filmed that live rec? Okay. Yeah.
So they've played there once and it was weird because that's not the venue for them.
Right.
But I just kept shooting every time they played. And I mean, they could mine this city. They could play every day and sell out every single show and make a whole bunch of money, but they never do that. They play maybe once a year, twice a year if you're lucky. But I just kept shooting and then I would send and tag photos and I became more friendly with Todd. And then, he eventually asked me, like they bought photos. They were never one of those bands. It's like, hey, can we have these for free? They were like, we'd love to use some of your photos for either some kind of promotional thing, some kind of whatever. Can you send us your top 10, top 20, top whatever? And so I'd send them all the high res. They paid. They're like, here you go. No questions asked.
Wow.
Which is great. And then eventually they asked me to come in the studio with them for Victory Lap. Yeah.
Are there any like promotional materials out there that listeners may have seen where you're like, hey, that's my picture?
Oh man. I think they may have used some for like European tours.
Cool.
Nothing that I've seen that I can think of off the top of my head, because most of my stuff is live shots.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the few studio things that they have, I don't know if they've used it. I mean, it was for Victory Lap, so they didn't use anything in Victory Lap, but I don't think, I've never seen any. So there might be, it might be out there.
Well, let's talk about your live experience, or your studio experience. As you mentioned, you photographed like the recording sessions with JP at Private Ear. You sent me a couple of those photos. They're amazing. And it was really, really cool because when I did my interview with JP for the Negredo episode, before we started, he took his phone all over the studio and with his like the video camera on so that I could see everywhere. And he actually showed me, he's like, all right, so right here's where we had George set up, and over here's where Chris was set up for vocals, and here's where blah, blah, blah. So he was like sort of giving me like a memory snapshot of where the band was in the studio for most of the sessions, which was super cool for me because he just geeked out with me for like 45 minutes before we even recorded a single piece of our conversation. So tell me about your experience of being in the studio. What's it like to be a photographer working in this space where people are very hard at work, very seriously engaged in something, but you're there trying to also do a job while also like not distracting from the work that's taking place? What's that process like?
I think this was one of the first times I was in the studio. I also have been in the studio with Mobina Galore from Winnipeg here. And it's weird because I don't want to step on anyone's toes. Like you said, I'm there trying to do a job, but I wasn't sure, like when George was like tracking some drums or whatever, I'm like, am I allowed to shoot right now? Like, is this going to fuck anything up in the recording? Which it doesn't, because you know, the mics are right there, and you know, JP is phenomenal at his job.
Yeah.
So once I got over that kind of hurdle, and I mean, at this point, I'm friendly with them. Like if I saw any of the guys, I mean, Sulin doesn't live here, but if I see any of the guys around town, it's like, hey, how's it going? Kind of wave, and, you know, or see them at a show. It's like, stop and talk to them. So once I got over, you know, I'm here because they asked me to be here and get these shots. I mean, it was pretty easy, and it's being in a studio is not as fun as everyone thinks it is.
Right.
It's goddamn boring because
it's
like
so hard too, because like the focus is so intense.
Chris would do like it was the track they were working on the one day was Adventures in Zoochosis.
Yeah.
And he was like doing that little intro part, just him playing guitar over and over and over.
That
yeah. And I'm just like, and then, you know, he would come back into the control room, and him and JP would listen and listen and listen. And I'm like, I can't hear a goddamn difference in one of these things, which is why those guys are both, all of them are really good at their jobs, because they can pick out the minutest little difference. And I'm just like, okay, cool. But it's not like, you know, The Dirt with Motley Crue. There's not coke and everything. There's no shenanigans really going on.
You know, and when I was talking to JP, he was talking about some of the takes that he would record that would like leave him sort of like impressed. You know, like I asked him about, did you like watch Chris sing those lines in Zoochosis that everybody chokes up on, like when they're listening to? He's like, absolutely. And it was incredible. Are there any memories that you have of like hearing a particular take or a performance where you're like, oh my God, that was awesome. I can't believe I got to see that.
I mean, it's all very fragmented.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the days that I was in the studio with them, because I definitely wasn't in there from like beginning to end. I think I'd spent 3 days with them, and they worked and only for like an hour and a half each, but they were working on Adventure in Zoochosis, which that intro, I was like, what is this here now? Like this doesn't sound like Propagandhi. Like, and then it, whatever. And then I think they were also working on, Sulin was doing a bunch of like backing vocals, screaming "Every dog has its day."
Nice.
which is very weird because you don't hear the music. It's just their vocals. And it's like, and I've got some video of that too. And I was just like, oh, I don't know if I can actually ever, because it's just Sulin singing every
Just
dog
one
has
line.
its day, just
Over
one
and over.
line. And then like JP would like be like, Kate, try it like this or try it like that. But no real anything that like, I mean, watching George Drum was incredible. He did do a few takes, and just watching him just go for it was pretty incredible.
I absolutely love that. Okay, so tell me about live now. I'm curious about like, shooting them live, like what that's like compared to being in the studio, because, I'd imagine everybody's like been pressed up against the barricade at one time in their life and seen the photographer like in the barricade, like, getting angles and stuff like that. What's it like shooting Propagandhi live?
Well, with them, they never have a barricade, or rarely have a barricade, especially here in Winnipeg. And so I'm in the pit. I am literally in the middle of the shit, hoping my camera doesn't get completely ripped off and broken.
Yeah.
But I love it. I wouldn't want to be anywhere else for that band. And it's just, now that they've got the quote unquote slower songs, that's when I can like run and get a beer and then come back, because it's not too much is going to happen. But just it's more watching the fans react and just go all out for them, because it gets crazy. It never gets dangerous. Maybe it did back in the day, but I think we're all getting older, and it's getting a little more tame in the pit until the bangers come on, and then it gets crazy. But just, I mean, watching, my favorite part of a Propagandhi live would be watching Todd, because that man, I don't know how he does it for an hour plus, but he is giving her. Like he is like, it's nonstop from beginning to end. And just, man, he is drenched by the end of the show, because he doesn't stop moving and just gives it his all.
Something that really stands out to me about my interview with Todd that we did for the Dark Matters episodes, when he was saying like, when I got a guitar, my only objective was to go nuts. Yeah. And I'm like, yes, absolutely. Because, that was like decades ago, and Todd's like, in his 40s or whatever, but like he still maintains that piece of his youth that comes out fully on stage. Like, it doesn't matter what his number of his age is, like he still retains this piece of his like adolescence that like I feel like will never go away for him. It's really special.
And it's funny, because I actually saw, the only time I think I've ever seen Todd mad was at a show here in Winnipeg at a venue, and Randy talked about this too, I think. The Union Sound Hall was a venue here in Winnipeg. And it was one of those nights where I think either his monitor kept cutting out, but there was this very annoying person that I don't know if she was a fan of the band or not, but every 2 minutes she's up on stage and diving off, and up on stage and diving off. And it's just one of those people. And Todd just like, not flipped out on her, but just got super mad, because I think it was more the technical issues. That cause he couldn't hear himself or something. It was funny, because it's just, Todd's such a chill, relaxed dude that it's watching him like kind of just like get super annoyed and pissed off was kind of funny.
Oh God, poor guy. All right. Well, Dwayne, let's chat a little bit about the music for the particular episode that you're on for our podcast here. When I asked you what song you wanted to talk about, you chose a song from Today's Empires, Tomorrow's Ashes. And I'm wondering if you can just tell me about what this record as a whole means to you in your life as a fan of music.
I mean, this record is, especially being, I mean, in music, it's, I don't even know what to say. It's angry. It's smart. It's, there's so many elements in this album that really hit home with me. And this is, and I've said it on my podcast before as well, this is when I think Propagandhi really becomes Propagandhi, not taken away from the first two albums because they're great. But with when Todd joined the band, I think the realization of what this band is finally came to fruition. It's like this is where we're headed. And with, Todd and Chris and George's love of like thrash and heavy music.
Yeah.
And especially with Todd playing that stuff in like I Spy and Swallowing Shit, like this is when Propagandhi is really the band that I think a lot of us have come to love.
Yeah, it's nice to hear somebody from Winnipeg or from who lives in Winnipeg say that, because so many people don't like the fact that Keith and I have professed our love of Empire's Onward over the 90s albums. And, that's obviously just anybody's personal preference, but I feel like the equilibrium within the band was established with Empires. Do you know what I mean? Like that's when I feel like everybody in the band was 100% on the same page for the direction and trajectory that the band would go in. Like, that's just my impression as a fan.
Yeah.
With no relationship with them. I don't know them, like really, so that's just my impression. Is that yours too?
Yeah. Like, I mean, I love Samson's contributions to the first two albums. They're great. They're a few of my favorite songs, like Gifts.
Yeah.
I love that song.
Yeah.
Is it really like, I would freaking kill to hear that song live. I never will unless.
Have you seen him play it? He plays it solo.
No, I haven't seen him play. I never went to a lot of Weaker Than stuff here.
Dude, you got to go online. You got to watch some of his online performances of Gifts. He's got 2 versions that I sampled in our Gifts episode where he like has these beautiful moments with the crowd, but like these ones where he just sounds amazing. And I'm like, whoa, that's how Gifts is supposed to be, is this new version that he has created in the aftermath of Propagandhi.
And see, that's what I think about with like Anchorless.
Yeah.
Anchorless is a beautiful song. It's great. It's not a Propagandhi song. That's a John Kay song. And when he plays it by himself or the Weaker Than's version, it's wonderful. But I mean, it's one of those things where it just sticks out like a sore thumb on Less Talk. Not in a bad way, because I mean, they've definitely done it throughout their career. They've got those quote unquote different sounding songs like Adventures in Zoochosis. Again, is it thrash? Not at all. But it really, I think it fits in with what they do on every album.
So Dwayne, when you selected your song, you picked Ladies Night in Loserville. Why did you pick this particular song?
I mean, I know I said something to you off air or on our private chat that the one song that had I been able to pick, I would have talked about, because it's the only Propagandhi song I hate, which isn't, I don't hate it. Oh, it's just so bad. And then you were like, well, someone else is talking about that one. And I'm like, well, good. Because I don't want to say I hate a Propagandhi song, but I definitely hate that song. Sorry, I hate the vocals on that song. But this one, I mean, you just read through the lyrics and it's, I don't even know how to put it into words. I've seen this happen in bars where, guys are like trying to pick up a lady and pretending they know more than they do, or they're too cool for school or whatever. And I'd be very interested to know how. I'm not even sure who wrote this one for sure. I think it might've been Chris. But where he got the idea to write this from, because it's like having somebody like writing it from kind of a woman's perspective or a female perspective. And like, I fucked to come like that. It's putting a very, I don't want to say masculine spin on it, but it's like, this is what I want don't bullshit me. Like this is if we're gonna do this, this is why I'm doing it, because I want to do it.
It takes ownership of the act of sex. Like, and there's a book that I read called Becoming Clitorate, and it's a fantastically interesting book about the inequality within sex between men and women, and the ways that so oftentimes it's a completely selfish act on the part of the man, because that's how a patriarchal structure of society works, essentially. And that book, Becoming Clitorate, talks about the ways that men have, used sex in ways that is unequal within relationships as, a form of immediate gratification with disregard for the experience of the partner.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what this song is to me. It's pro-feminist, it's pro-sex, and we need, like, we all have like agenda. We should like have clear communication about our agenda within sex. And so oftentimes it's just a one-sided transactional approach from the man, who then is done and over it and moving on and essentially disregarding of the partner. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah. I mean, see, you put it much more succinctly than I ever could, because I agree 100% with that.
Yeah. And it's like, I was thinking about that book a little more, Becoming Clitorate. It's like, it talks about like the main event of sex, and how the main event of sex is viewed differently between men and between women. And so for men, the main event of sex is the visual that is popping up into every listener's mind. But the main event of sex for women is not necessarily the main event that pops up in the minds of men.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem is that men never say, or rarely say to their partners, what is the main event to you? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because men know what their main event is, but if they don't ask the other partner, what is your main event, then they will never know. And this song to me is like, this is my main event. Do you know what I mean? So it's like the opposite perspective of, it's the answer to the question that men fail to ask, which is, there's my tangent.
Anyway. I love tangents.
Yeah. Well, okay. So what do you, is there anything in particular that you dig about the musical performance of this song, like in the instrumentation or in like the vocal performance or like the musicianship whatsoever?
I mean, I'm definitely not a musician. I played organ growing up, and then after that, I just kind of quit playing music. I'm more of a music appreciator.
Yeah.
But I love how this song kind of starts off a little slow.
Yeah.
And then it's just like a punch in the face. And that's kind of, to me, where it's like, that's where the pit opens up. That's where people are going crazy. And that's what this song kind of emotionally, like musically, it invokes in me, is everyone's kind of milling and just whatever. And I've definitely started off a pit where it's like, as soon as that first note hits, where it's like Back to the Motor League or something like that.
Yeah.
And you just push the person in front of you, and then you just get it going. And this song is definitely one of those songs where it's like, it's a little slow, and then it just kicks into overdrive, and it's a minute and a half of just solid. You're not stopping.
I love it. Well, and you know what's really interesting about this is earlier we talked about Zucosis and how it has that slow intro. And this one also has one of those, that slow intro. And then what's so fascinating to me is about after the and then but then when the drums come in, like on the full speed beat, it comes in way faster than it feels like it's going to whenever they go and then it's like and then it goes way faster than it feels like it's going to. So it has this really mellow build, and then this medium kick in, and then this super ultra fast like when it really comes in, like it comes in much faster than it feels like it's going to. So it's like even more of a punch in the face when the full on beat kicks in, which I love. It's like a trick, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Do you have any other particular like lines in the song that like really jump out at you? Cause like there's like these like references to like Larry Flint, and there's these references to like the Trinity. Any thoughts on any of that kind of stuff? First Amendment. Oh my gosh.
I love the line, don't let you repress shit on me.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I have no dog in that fight. I know what I am. I'm a cis white male. I'm not repressed.
Right.
You know? So it's like I put myself, and maybe I've even done this trying to impress a woman too. I have no idea. I don't think I have. Like, I don't try to talk out of my depth, or, you know, if people are like in the first line, like spits out a Greek translation. I've definitely never done that. Like I'm not going to pretend I'm smarter than I am.
Yeah.
But I put myself in that role, and like it's reading back through the lyrics. Like when I knew I was going to talk about the song and going to talk to you about this, I put myself in the role of the man talking to this woman or this person, I guess I should say. And I'm like, have I done that? And if I have, I shouldn't do it.
Yeah.
And it just makes me, it just makes me want to be a better person.
Yeah.
It makes me want to, you know, watch other people. And I'm never going to say whatever, they can do what they want as long as they're not hurting anyone. And I'll just laugh at them. Just watching someone try to impress someone else is very funny.
Dude, you've probably seen it. You know that meme that like goes around on the internet with like the guy who's obviously very drunk and his eyes are going in different directions, and he has his arm wrapped around a girl and he's essentially yelling right in her ear at a bar, and her face is just one of agony. Yeah. And it's like her face just says everything you need to know about being in that moment of having this disgusting person with their disgusting breath breathing into your ear, yelling, thinking that they're like picking you up. Do you know what I mean? It's just really telling on the ways that how we should consider interacting with each other in public settings.
And I mean, it fits in like that meme fits in perfect with in the first verse, whatever, because you've been feeding me this crap about free speech and thought police, like I'm supposed to sit and swoon.
Yeah.
And that's exactly possibly what that guy was doing, was like, you know, talking all this shit. And it's like, you know, don't say what you think I want to hear. Just, you know, if we're going to fuck, I'll make that decision and you're going to whatever. And I want it as badly as you want it. And this is why we're doing it.
Oh man, I absolutely love this song. And you know, for anybody out there listening, like this is like whenever you read lyrics like this, like the thought of like talking about these things in a podcast is like, it's hard. Do you know what I mean? It challenges you and me to think about what this means in like the grand scheme of our lives based on who you and I are, do you know?
Yeah.
And it's this song has played a very important role in my life. And you know, as I alluded to earlier with like the books, these are topics that I'm continuously learning about and seeking to know more about. And it's just like really mind-bogglingly impressive that Propagandhi wrote a song like this that came out on a record 20 years ago. It's really wild to think that they were thinking about these things so long ago. And something that I think would be so amazing is if they played this live, getting guest vocalists,
oh man,
you know, who are like women to come up there and just like just go off on this song.
It would be amazing to hear like Celine like sing this whole song.
Yeah.
Like, and also I'm looking at the lyrics, and again, the one line that it makes me chuckle, but makes me like feel good, that if any female or female identifying person has ever, or anyone has ever said like, no needle dick's gonna silence me.
Yeah.
Fuck yeah.
I love it.
Like, it's I mean, nobody should ever be silenced over anything, but yeah, just because you happen to be you have a penis doesn't mean you're going to talk over me, doesn't mean you're better than me. You're not going to silence, like, oh, I love it,
dude. And it's like, I think about like, corporate boardroom meetings or like faculty meetings or like, inter-office like meetings where you think about like who gets spoken over constantly. Like these are issues that are so ever present in every single aspect and facet of society. And it's worth reflecting on for every single person. Well, Dwayne, what does, you've been a fan of Propagandhi for a long time. You've worked with them in several capacities. Tell me what they mean to you as a person. Like, how do they inspire you?
Like I had said before, not even just this song, but like the whole kind of like discography, their whole collection. I get excited for new records and new songs because it pushes me to, number one, be a better person. Number two, learn about new things. Like I didn't know what the fuck COINTELPRO was. Right. I had no idea. And then I'm like, I learned more about it. Just learning more about stuff that I don't know anything about, or it just pushes me to be a better person. Also, I go on these things. I've talked about it on many of my podcast episodes. I'd like to call them old man walks. So I just go for a walk because I usually run in the spring, summer, and fall, not running in the winter because it's slippery. Don't want to kill myself. Yeah. Don't care that much. So I just go on a walk, listen to some music. And yesterday, actually, Purina Hall of Fame came on. And I love all of their songs about veganism, about animal activism. And I'm not completely a vegan. Like if you want to call it falling off the wagon, I still enjoy cheese, eggs occasionally. I've got a soft spot in my heart for fried chicken because I've tried fried tofu chicken. I've tried all that. It's not the same. I don't have it very often, like maybe once a year, maybe. But my girlfriend is vegan, has been for 6 years now. So at home, we're 100% vegan. But when songs like that, like when that came on, it just reaffirmed the belief why I don't want to eat any kind of meat again.
Yeah.
And I try to remember that when I have like that fried chicken craving and I'm like, I really want this. And then I'm like, but is this just a craving? Or do I really want this? Like what are the longer ramifications of that? And then I'm just like, no, I don't really need this. I'll make something else that's just maybe not just as good, but
I love it. Well, Dwayne, you've mentioned several like podcasts and things like that. Like, but tell everybody where they can find you. Maybe give some various ideas for where people can find your different projects, because you have several. So maybe you can give people pointers and directions that they could find you.
I mean, all the usual suspects on iTunes, Spotify. You just either have to type in "It's a Music Thing" and it should pop up, or for the photography one, Filters Removed. You type in either one of those, and I Google Play. I think that's a thing. I'm not sure. I'm a Mac user, so I don't know too much about that. But yeah, any of the streaming platforms have "It's a Music Thing" or Filters Removed. You can get them.
And what about do you have like a personal website where people can contact you for like business related things?
Yeah, it's just DwayneLarson.com.
Awesome.
If you want to see I had a music website, It's a Music Thing, but I took it down because for It's a Music Thing, it didn't kind of come to the full realization that I wanted it to. It was more like an online portfolio. But Instagram, just type in It's a Music Thing MB for Manitoba.
Okay.
It's got right now, I mean, it's all mostly little podcast stuff because live music isn't happening yet. Yeah. But when it does, there'll be live music photos and stuff like that up there too.
What about social media for your photography?
Just Dwayne Larson.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, all right.
And that'll be, I mean, that's a little, if you're really into music, that's a little quote unquote less exciting.
Yeah.
Because it's more of my corporate architecture work, weddings, all that kind of stuff. But if you like looking at pretty photos, I definitely do take them.
A lot of people out here on who follow us really like that kind of stuff, so I just wanted to make sure people can know where to find you. But Dwayne, this has been a real pleasure talking to you for Unscripted Moments of Podcast with Propagandhi. Great stories, great hang. You've made my Friday definitely a lot brighter today. So we're grateful to you for your participation, your time, your stories. It's just been really awesome, dude.
Awesome. I mean, I've listened to the podcast just about every episode.
Wow.
And I really enjoy it. It's like I said, I go on my old man walks. It's either music or podcast because I can turn everything else off and just listen. And I know you've had a few Winnipeg folks on here, like Randy's stories were, I loved them. And when he was talking about some of the stuff, I'm like, I was at that show. Yeah. I was there. Like there was one that I wish I could remember because I think I had a funny story about it, but I can't, I can't remember.
That's one of my reasons why I always ask guests about seeing Propagandhi live is because you never know who out there is going to hear and say, oh my God, I was there too. Like when I asked Frank Turner when he had seen Propagandhi, and he's like, oh yeah, I was at the Islington show in 2009. And I was like, dude, I was there too. And so Frank Turner and I were like in the same room together watching Propagandhi just as fans. And now Frank Turner plays freaking Wembley Stadium with his band. So
yeah.
It's just awesome to see moments where it's like, dude, we had that moment together and we both have that in our shared collective memory. And like, that's why I love getting these kinds of stories down. And that's why I always ask about when people have seen Propagandhi, because you never know who's going to hear it, who's going to connect with that moment.
And actually that just made me remember one of my most memorable Propagandhi stories. And it has nothing to do with them playing. It was here in Manitoba, we've got a thing called Manitoba Metal Fest.
Mm-hmm.
And Corey, who organizes everything, does such a great job at kind of curating 2 days of metal. And I'm not a huge metal fan. Like this is like thrash, death, hardcore. Like it's a little bit of everything mixed in. And I can't remember which year it was or which show, but all three of the guys were there, Jord, Chris, and Todd. And they were all near the front watching whoever was on stage, whatever band. And that really, like, that hit home with me so hard. Cause I'm like, there's these guys that, love music and will come out and support like a local festival, and guaranteed they bought their tickets. They didn't ask for comps. They, didn't do any of that. And that they're right near the front, just enjoying the show. And I'm like, I hope I can still be doing that when I'm not going to say when I'm quote unquote their age, because
you're right.
I'm pretty close, not super, super close, but I kind of want to keep, even if I've got to keep moving back and away from the pit, I want to keep doing that because just, seeing that, and they come out and support local bands all the time. Like I see Todd at many shows.
Yeah. I love it. Well, and I'd imagine that a lot of people out there, regardless of age, are thinking about the, post-vaccine world and the return of live entertainment in all ways, whether it's stage productions, live drama, stand-up comedy, bands, live dance, whatever. Like it's going to be this deluge of entertainment where people, I hope of all ages, are going to like reconnect with some things that at one time brought them joy and maybe they had given up because of like demands of life and parenthood and work and like, oh, I'm too tired tonight. I'm thinking that we're going to have a few years of really rich culture and activity as people and as societies in the years after all the vaccines and everything come out for COVID. At least that's my hope and my dream.
Yeah. Like I don't ever want to say, if I ever say, and I've told my girlfriend this, I'm like, if I ever say I'm too tired to go out tonight to go to the show, just smack me in the head and be like, no, go. Like, and it's there in my head that I'm not going to say oh, I don't really want to see this band. I don't really, no, I do, even if I'm tired, I'm going to go to the show. I'm going to shoot it. And even if I don't like it, I'm going to take something positive away from it. Whether it's, I saw that person, because I've had one in particular, a friend, she committed suicide early last year. And it's like, she was one of those show friends, you only kind of see at shows. And I'm like, fuck, that sucks. And I don't ever want that to happen again. So I want to see all my friends whenever I can.
And you're going to go on behalf of the person who isn't there anymore. And you're going to be like, man, every time you walk in that room of Park Theater or whatever, and that person's not there, you're going to think about them. And you're going to be like, this one's for you. Let's rock out.
That's probably going to be, oh, you just gave me goosebumps, because I got her tickets to the last Propagandhi show that they played at the park, and she had never seen Prop before.
Mm-hmm.
And
September 2019, I think, is when that show happened.
And she had never seen them before. I got her tickets, and then now she's not here anymore. So,
and you have that memory for next time you walk in the Park Theater,
the next Prop one is definitely going to be for her.
It's beautiful. Well, Dwayne, thank you so much. I've just absolutely loved hanging out with you today.
I appreciate you asking me, and I love doing this. It's my favorite band, probably always will be my favorite band. At some point, well, you can see I'm covered with tattoos. There will be a Propagandhi tattoo. I just gotta figure out what.
Don't lay your reaping shit on me. I fucking call. Fuck you up with the Trinity. I fucking call.